I'm awake. Are you?
I wonder how many miles I've fallen. It seems I'll get to the center of the earth. Curious, isn't it? And really, nothing's quite impossible.
Let's go now to our new episode of The Unfiltered Rise with me, Heidi Love.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Unfiltered Rise with me, Heidi Love. And we are back. So, sort of, right? Everything's going to be a learning curve for a little while just because I'm having to do a lot of things differently. So, yeah, I am probably going to have to either splice these slides in or add them on. I'm not sure how, but as for now, you just get my face, and hopefully this will work. If not, it will be different even still, and that we'll just leave that for there for now. But I won't quit. And no matter how hard it gets, we'll just keep trucking along. I already know what the agenda is to make me stop, and I won't stop. And so I will never sell out. I will never not have my own brand. I am a sole proprietor, and I've filed taxes this way for multiple years now. So no one can take over my business. I am telling it right now and here. This is a business that is well laid with taxes paid, and you can't have it. So if anybody tries to do that, that is also negated here and now. As I have stated, I am a sole proprietorship of my own company. So you guys, thank you so much for sticking it through with me. I know it's really not been up to par, and I'm well aware and trying to work around it every which way I can, especially probably offline and alone for quite some time. So with that, that's a bummer because I really like lives. I really love having the interaction with you guys, and I look forward to it. I read all of them. I have not been able to stay signed into YouTube this whole situation, so I'll just do a little housekeeping with that. It's a lot more in depth than I thought it would be. Some breaches are coming up at my job and my real, regular job. I wish this was my full-time job, but yeah, so that was weird. And it causes some complications because some of the people I take care of are, it's a protected setting. It's a HIPAA violation. It's totally against the law. And I want people to understand that may possibly be tapping into that. Therefore, you write your own death warrant on the HIPAA violations. I'm sure they won't be kind. With health violations, it's pretty serious. And yeah, I don't want to get into too far what I found so far because I don't know what I can say and what I can't say with an investigation pending. So I don't want to get in trouble, but it's not good. So with that, as I said, I'm going to figure this out on this whole recording. I don't even have my webcam anymore attached, anything. So, and this is blocked and not online and the whole 9 yards. So yeah, if you guys aren't hearing from me as much, it's because of that and nothing else. I would love to keep in touch better. I would love to, comment back to all the comments. I don't know what to do right now. So, with that, like I said, I'm making plan A, B, C, D, LMNOP, and I will not quit. So there's that. So if that was what you were trying to do, you're going to fail. So with that, let's pick up where we left off. And on these slides anyways, a lot of them were word slides. And that's why I thought, oh, well, let's give this a try. May as well, I can't do a ton of editing yet, but it's quick and dirty. So Mormons, my favorite subject, are critical. Who knew? In this whole DNA testing and DNA establishing here in Utah, which is bananas to me. I had no idea before Mr. Epstein blew up all over the place that this was even the case. I knew about genetics and, epigenetics and, I knew about ancestry and I knew that there were, the eugenics movement and all this stuff, but I did not know that the Mormon families played such a huge part in the DNA creation. So I would love to chat with you guys about this today. So a lot of this stuff is vetted from articles. I do have it at the bottom, so I'll try to tell you guys. This one came from Harvard EDU. And this says it was later bought Ancestry.com, another Mormon company, bought out James Sorensen's actual beginnings of ancestry, kind of ancestry.com. So it's bananas to me that we had no idea that this was one of the first genetic testing kit companies. I had no clue. Certainly, this has been clear back to 2001. This James Sorensen is a billionaire. I'm not saying anything bad about him. I'm just saying like that's who created it at first. And the LDS church members receive, of course, free memberships to ancestry.com. I think I've mentioned that before. And they can send different things to relatives and make connections and whatnot, kind of like a Facebook of, genetics. Who knows? Whatever. So this little article talks about James Sorensen, and James Lavoie Sorensen is his name. He was the Mormon billionaire and philanthropist. Aren't they always? Isn't that funny? I don't know. No shade on James. He seems fine. But as we know with philanthropy, it can get weird. And I hope my mute button works because my allergies are wild. So anyway, James was one of the earliest companies, as I mentioned, testing for ancestry and genealogy. He was driven in part by his religious interests, of course, and identifying ancestral lineages. So I don't know if most people know this, and I do know this because I was Mormon forever, is that, everybody for a while when DNA got hot and new on the presses, they were thinking, oh, we're going to finally prove, the Native American ties and whatever. And so it will be, we can trace it back and the Book of Mormon will be proven and it will be great. And that didn't really work out. Actually, I've done little clips on the guy that kind of wanted to continue forwarding that. And it wasn't good because the church was like, nah, bro, shut up. And so literally he got in kind of trouble. So not James, another guy. So it obviously failed because they were trying to prove that, the Native Americans were, part of the lost tribes and whatever, but it didn't happen the way that they thought it would. So it was kind of a fail and they told the guy to cut it out. So, but James, he decided to take this in a different, direction and kind of start this whole ancestry.com with it. And we know, that this has been a continual, since who? Since Bill Gates. I mean, Bill Gates just pops up all over the place. He was a busy, busy guy. I'm just surprised he had so much time to, capture a king and keep him quiet and then, do all this stuff on the side. But as we know, the king was Howard Hughes. And so, he was one of the first to help digitize the data that was raw, not the DNA data, but the genealogical data that builds Ancestry.com to this day. And he did that through a company called Hughes Dynamics. And Hughes Dynamics was an offshoot of Howard Hughes's company that Bill Gates started without really the knowledge or approval of Howard. And he did freak out when it came to be that, he found out about it and he shut it down. But he did, I think, obviously either continue with the church or continue with someone because the rest of these records became digitized. And so all of this, encompassed with the DNA, it made for a very fast track with all of the scientific, developments during this time. So these kits, and like I said, they were new. This was one of the earliest. It was called relative genetics. I forgot to mention that part. And it was bought out at a later time. So I found that fascinating. James, he made us go forward into the, genetic continuation of Mormons. So also, what else is kind of strange, and I felt like very under the bar, we'll say, okay, is that, the church knew and had many scientists that worked on these Ceph families, CEPH, and you guys can look those up. And we talked about these last time. I think we're going to have a slide coming up here in just a minute, and I will figure out a way to run these slides, whether I put them in after or whatever. It may not happen this time, but they're words this time. So anyway, they say they were mostly working on birth defects and cancer genes. And I'm not saying that they weren't, altruistic in many forms, but we know that once information is out there, oftentimes it can be corrupted to a lot of different vices. And so obviously, the church having all these records online, the DNA being, brought forth with James and all his work and family search, and all this stuff has turned into later on what becomes, 23andMe. All this stuff bleeds out of the same thing. So it's really quite interesting, and, James himself was kind of an interesting character, also Thomas Murphy. I think James is still alive, P.S. I'm talking about him in past tense, and I don't think he's gone, but I can't 100% say. So Thomas Murphy was involved. He was another one that was really involved about, all this genetic. And I think he was the one that was threatened to be excommunicated. So you guys can check me on that. But he was the one that was saying, oh, it's going to prove the Book of Mormon, like I mentioned before. So I think that was the name of him. So all these altruistic things, became a piece of the puzzle with all of the forefathers, we'll say, of DNA going after this quite aggressively. Like I mentioned, James, this is a comment from him. He said, who would have known the foresight and sense of community? Tens of thousands of first participants humbled me. I have deep respect for their offering still because it has produced an enormously powerful tool from which all of us now benefit. And these donors are the backbone of which modern genetic genealogy has been built. The data from these people collected by the SMGF later became foundational platform for which ancestry DNA databases were formed. So basically what I mentioned, again, he says this, those are his words. And I do have a photo of him and I'll try and get that spliced in. He looks quite young there, and I don't think he's passed. I really think he's still alive. And I didn't find any huge dirt on him. I wasn't trying. So I just want to mention that this was critical, not just for Utah, but overall for genetics and DNA and all of the things that are going to come forth, to bust open with this Epstein case later. So one of those things as well is the Utah Genome Project. And the Utah Genome Project is wild. And it has its feet wet from many scientists, including George Church, who's going to come up again. And it's just interesting to me that why are we seeing it so often, right? I don't know. It just seems strange to me, I guess. I don't know. Sorry if that was a weird pause. Me and my allergies are having a fight. So I did take an allergy pill there. So the Utah Genome Project was originally trying to help with uncommon rare diseases such as Miller syndrome and primary ciliary dyskinesia, Alzheimer research, and all of this is going on at BYU and the U of U. And they're identifying certain things that are really good and helpful in science. Like none of this stuff that I'm talking about is nefarious, right? This is just going to be used nefariously in another time and another place. But I truly believe probably at this point in time, these were scientists just trying to go forward in, progressing mankind with, all their knowledge. So I don't know that it was a bad thing at all. I'm not even going to pass judgment on it, but Utah was a very important place for it. And we see time and time again it pop up. And strangely so, with mentioning of blood and whatever, and we'll get into that. But I just think it's an odd phenomenon that it's so little known, right? And so they're doing rapid sequencing at the U of U. At that time, they were genome sequencing for critically ill newborns. They were doing all these things, and of course, it's in the name of science and saving and blocking viruses like Ebola and HIV. Well, which makes one wonder, does that connect, with some unethical things that we saw practiced later in other countries? And I'm not going to get into him right now, because if we do that, we're going to get derailed. But we do know that was mentioned, there's been a lot of people that have been in trouble for using this knowledge to not the best of the ability. So yeah, we'll just leave that there. And, this whole situation, I am going to make sure you guys can see this picture, whether I have to post it on Twitter. I'm not on IG right now because it just keeps getting hacked, or Facebook. Anybody that's on Facebook posting as me, that's not me. And so, yeah, I will be either redoing that page or something soon. I tried to shut it down and somebody reopened it. So I don't know, but my Twitter seems to be a little more secure. So that's where I will definitely be putting this photo, because this photo was very strange. So there's a bunch of girls and they're holding like their hands like a gun, and they're saying, "We were called Woodward's Angels. We were so very young," from left, and it has their names, and I'm just not going to read them because it's fine. You guys can read them when you see it, but I don't want to blast it on here. They were, saying that they were helping and in this science, lab, and they don't look like sciencey girls. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying, I guess it was a different time, but they do look a little like some Charlie's Angels. I can see why, they would say that. So, yeah, I don't know what was happening there. No shade again, just a little strange. That's all. I didn't play Who Was Your Daddy and What Did He Do, nor did I play Who Is Your Hubby and Where Is He Now? But nah, it might be a little strange there. So the contributions of the DNA, kits and all this stuff that we're talking about, this is still contained within that movement for, the original, I guess, 23andMe or original ancestry, whatever we want to call. So, and we've also had other doctors completely involved in this that were huge in this movement. So remember, we've got Bill Gay, we've got the war, we've got IBM, we've got, the Gates, who definitely were instrumental on getting, those holorith cards. And I've mentioned this before, and the IBM collections, and working with the church clearly. I mean, the CIA gave those up. There's a declassified CIA doc talking about this, but, they got those cards from the war. They've got, different things. They've worked with churches and received genetic stuff there. Then we get into Gay, and he's computerizing everything. And then we get into, all the DNA studies. And we also, in 1974, we get Mark Skolnick. Okay. And Mark Skolnick was there to also continue computerizing the genealogical database. And that was started, it says, by a planning grant for cancer from the NIH. Well, this is going to come into play as to why was church and state working so closely together at this point? I don't know, but it is going to play multiple factors later, and it's fine. I'm not going to say I know anything about what these people were specifically doing. It looks altruistic, like I've said, but it's also interesting about, Utah population databases and the Utah population in general that became and is still a gold standard for the world, which seems weird. So yeah, I just don't know there. That just seems strange. So I mean, maybe it's just, we don't smoke or whatever, but a lot of them still do. So I don't know. Anyway, so there's a Dr. Gestland being interviewed in this little clip, and there's no photo. So this is really just words still. And he says, what about all this? And he said, well, when we got that grant, we went forward and started gathering the rest of the genetics and studying them and assembling the families that would be useful to study and understand their genetics. This is all happening in Utah. And the interviewer says, and that's what's called the Utah Population Database, correct? And he said, yes. And then it built from there when the Human Genetics Department was founded with Ray White, and he's critical. I don't know how he goes so under the radar, because his just his scientific experiments and his scientific expertise and everything, just it was heads and tails above anything I've ever heard recent. But this was old. And so I'm thinking, well, I mean, geez, what happened there? Why no accolades? But it seems as if they were keeping this really DL. So whatever, maybe they still want that DL. Maybe that's why I'm screwed, but I don't know. But I'm definitely wanting to get the rest of these out, because I know that around this time, when I started talking about this particular stuff, that's when things definitely went awry. So anyway, he says, yeah, it built from there with, Ray White. And he said that is building on a base that was already here. So we know the base he's speaking of is definitely with Gay, the man, Gay, Bill Gay. And so the interviewer says, really, the seeds of all this is the unique population that's here in Utah, I imagine. The fact that they keep detailed records of their ancestry and have large families. So, right? Strange. Yeah, that's right. So that's the end of the snip I got from that article. But I just found it fascinating that all of this stuff is going on and Utah laid low. Like you never hear about, oh, yeah, Utah was like the prime thing for genetics, the prime thing for this or no, you never hear about any of that. Of course, you hear about big families and Mormons. Okay. But what about the rest of that? I don't know. It's very strange. So, yeah. Me and my allergies are the hot mess express tonight. So. All right. So next one I have here, and I don't have the site that it's from, but I do have, it's from Health Library, and it's called Utah's History of Genetic Innovation in the Beginning. And this is dated July 6th, 2015. So it says, for over 50 years, the University of Utah has been a leader in human genetics. Weird. And the field of making precision medicine possible today. You don't say. So Ray Gesslin, that's the one that was being interviewed previous, right, that we were talking about, who was giving his accolades to a different doctor. So this is on and on and on. PhD Professor Emeritus in Human Genetics describes the perfect storm of people and resources at the University of Utah and how they spurred discoveries of the genetic courses behind cystic fibrosis, colon cancer, and many more. And I know that this was all backed by Huntsman Institute, okay? And for those that don't know, Huntsman even opened up a big cancer hospital, and it was like a training hospital. It's still here. My grandpa actually had to go there when he was really sick. And so, yeah. And actually he left because he was like, why are you guys poking me so much? I don't like this. But I know there's people that do want to, go forward and do all the things. So no shade at all there. I'm just saying, who knew that this was so critical, right? Well, it gets it even better because just so you guys know, Gesslin starts talking about this meeting and the events that led to the discovery of all of this stuff. Okay. And guess where it is? The Alta Club, the Alta meeting. And this Alta meeting is where they all got together and they're discovering restriction, fragmental length, polymorphism, RFLP, a tool that made gene mapping, okay, the human genome mapping possible. So this is in 2015. And I'm like, how did this go so underneath the radar that, has anyone out there, please put in the comments, ever heard that Utah and the Alta Club and all this was so important in genetics? Like, maybe I missed the boat, whatever. But I just find it, I don't know. I just find it a little strange, right? And we know that not only with all of this, okay, and we're going to keep going, and I think a few of these are out of order, so I'm just going to keep trucking through, but we know not only that, but the earliest Mormon leaders, okay, in Utah, they wanted to adopt a doctrine, and I'm going to put this is in quotes, okay, for breeding perfect humans. Yeah, you heard me. We've heard that before as of late with some of the slides that I can't show of the EFTs, with the case, they're talking about breeding perfect embryos and designer babies. So I think that they were more focused in on this and being a chosen people and whatever, being Zion and encourage certain, people to get married. And I have some awesome slides coming up and I hope I can splice them in, but we'll talk about them. But they definitely encouraged, eugenics, number one, to fix the ones that aren't, up to snuff. And they also, cultivated fit families. This is one of the things that says Utah was often praised by their proponents of positive eugenics for its focus on cultivating fit families. So better than you, just FYI. Their theological foundation, the doctrine of building a kingdom on earth, aka Zion, and the practice of polygamy, right? We're going to spread our seed far and wide, which they definitely did that. But then they didn't, right? Like Brigham Young, I think he only had kids with 16 of his wives, and he had over 50. So that's a little strange for me. Like, I haven't got directly into that. And I know people will say, oh, this and that about him being older. They weren't, though. Not all of them. That doesn't explain it. So strange, right? And we get these genetic consequences and the insular nature of some, polygamous problems, communities that are closed, where, yeah, you start getting some really strange mutations. We'll call it that, because that's basically what it is. And when we're dealing with this, no shit, there's a doctor named Dr. Mason, and then there's one named Dr. Faust, and I just went, are you screwing with me? Like, is this real? But yeah, according to the U of U Health, okay, Dr. James O. Mason, a distinguished member of the School of Medicine class of 1958, he was given like multiple awards, being top of his class. He's like the who's who. And this article is, like I said, the U of U Health, and it's from 2018. Okay. And May 7th, 2018. And it's called Dean's Roundtable, James Mason, MD. So they're talking about this James Mason, Dr. Mason, not Faust yet, and what he does and how he has now become the director of the Disease Control Center. Okay. He also was the Assistant Secretary for Health. This is all during the same time frame, right? We've got like DNA on the rise with the whole thing in the Genome Project, and we've got all this stuff happening in Utah, like bam, bam, bam. And I've lived here and all my life, and yeah, I never heard about any of this. So I find that a little crazy. But anyway, of course, he's on the WHO and just everything. He is the WHO. He's the who's who. Okay. And I'm not saying anything bad about him. I'm just saying that he was a huge part of this, and he becomes involved highly in government, right? He becomes elevated to all these different posts. And then we continue to see the Mormon families, doing all of this study, okay, the studies on them, and they're using them basically as guinea pigs. And I'll tell you something, like, if you want to see a society that are yes, ma'am, yes, sir, people, especially when it comes to religion, it is Mormons. And, I'm not going to say that's a bad thing, but it can be, you don't want to be led straight off a cliff. That's for sure. So when we see this kind of stuff and you go, okay, why are they so just hyper focused on these genetics, right? Because I would think this is more of a dirty pool here, and I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but when you start having everyone in the whole, country of Utah, not country, when you start having everyone in the whole state of Utah, the country of Deseret, no, when you start having everyone here become related to each other, I don't know that that's something that you want to keep up, right? Like, I get it for the testing for these certain diseases or whatever's happening, but like, they're using them as the gold standard. And I'm like, wait, like, all of these people are probably a little bit related. That's why Mormons have a look, right? And so, I don't know what's going on there, but this one talks about just that. What makes Utah families unique? Okay. About the genealogy and how, they were using them, and the genetics, if people only have one child, it's not going to be enough. And so, yeah, they want, people with 5 to 7 children. So here in Utah was the perfect testing ground. And I understand that part. So, okay, that's good. But also, I guess they were just looking for, genes and the specifics of the segments of the DNA. So this goes deeper than just figuring out diseases, because the very last thing on this particular article, it says increasing their chances of finding a genetic basis for disease. Okay. So then they start talking about how they want to make it, so you can live longer. And we know that Mormons and transhumanism go hand in hand, right? So I've got another picture of the legacy of the discoveries, especially whereas University of Utah's, considered. I don't know if I can get it very clear, But 1 second. Sorry, I coughed and I hope I can edit that out. But it's called A Legacy of Discovery Genetics at the University of Utah. And it looks like the Helix DNA, and then it's got all the stuff out to the side so you guys can try and find it. Or I'm hopefully being able to splice these in because I have no editing stuff right now. But it was really interesting to me between that and the Ceph families, CEPH, which we're going to talk about right now. Ceph Utah pedigree 1331 is a prominent 3-generation family cohort used in genetic research for mapping and benchmarking, particularly within the Ceph Human Variation Collection. And this is maintained by Coriell Institute. So this family was used to establish human linkage maps, okay? And the international HAP map project and the 1,000 Genomes project, and all these projects come from just a few Mormon families. Yeah, there was a lot, but not that many, if you're looking at the world. So I just find this strange that this is where they're absolutely, laying the ground, right? So the collection origin actually started and got sent over to France, which is strange because we're talking about Mormons again. And the collection structure, the 3-generation Utah family part of the NIGMS Human Genetic Cell Repository. Okay. So then we've got all this, they're stashing them everywhere, right? Basically. And the genotyping data, we've got the pedigrees that they've actually genotyped down where they use these specifically for not just some cancer. It is the gold standard. Okay. If people want to check this out, check out GM06990. This is the genotyped family that they use a lot of times. And this all goes back to Mormons. Okay. And then they go into cell lines and lymphocytes and all of this stuff for these genetic studies. And I just think, okay, well, like I said, I don't know that our gene pool is the best gene pool to go into for that because literally everyone's really, I don't know. Anyway, so moving forward, right? We've got all these doctors that I've laid on the table, some working for the government, some not, all working for universities, definitely 100% involved in all of this. Okay. They are all just doing their best to bring it on forward, which is fine. There's nothing bad about that. But let's not forget about when you get information that maybe you're not 100% ready for, everything in the world. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't have it, right? Who knows? Whatever. So the research during, Hughes era is Dr. Mark K. Allen, Frank M. Driggs, Dr. Mason, all these people, and just remember all of this because it's going to come into play when we get into Utah State training schools in American Fork, okay? And it gets into eugenics quite a bit. So when we look at all of their studies and the Human Genome Project and the Utah Genome Project and why they were able to go through and make these discoveries and where they made them and how they made them and why. I just always find it strange when we find these little quotes, and this is one, okay, about different people possibly in the church as well, right? And so, President Benson was one of them that talked about this, and he was like, "Oh, God has more than one idea for this. God has more than one idea for one." Oh, let me read it specific. I've heard Prophet Gordon B. Hinckley, wrong prophet. They all look the same. No, just kidding. Gordon B. Hinckley say that, quote, "The Lord has more than one purpose in mind for family history." So, and he was speaking to someone in the whole realm of genetics and this research, okay? And about Dr. Warner, Dr. Smart, Dr. Roger Williams, all these people that were early on helping. And where were they funded, right? Yes, we have some grants from the government, but where else is the money coming from, right? Well, we know Howard Hughes Medical Institute has a lot to do with genetics. He wanted to understand the genetics of life and the creation and, longevity. Howard Hughes he was different. And supposedly, this is a rumor from, I think the book is down here, maybe not, Age of Secrets. And he was one of Howard Hughes's top guys that actually saw him, which was rare. Okay. And this particular guy, he talks all about how he went into another country and cryogenically had the cryogenic coffin for him made, and how he wanted to be frozen, and just a lot. Okay. And people are like, oh, he's just OCD. Was he? Because we sure do see this popping up again. I'm just saying. So when we see, George Church pop up, and we know that he's 100% tied not only to Epstein right now, but we also know, this polymath, superstar of genetics, super into all of this stuff. Okay. He's in with the sequencing of CRISPR technology, right? Much like Hughes, he pushed the boundaries of aviation and film. Well, Church did the same with, genetics. He's like the genetic hero. And so he's kind of one of the, I guess, early scientists that were a superstar. That didn't used to happen. Scientists were just dumb nerds not dumb, but you get what I'm saying. They were just nerdy guys that were at whatever university. And if they got published, it was only important to the people that were there. But then it changed, right? And it became superstardom of scientists. And Church was one of those, 110%. He wasn't alone. That is for sure. And we have to remember, James Sorensen. Don't forget, he's Mormon. We've got Craig J. Venter. He's a pioneer also of the Human Genome Project. He was born here in Salt Lake City. His father was Mormon. He says he's an atheist, so he's not, but I mean, he was raised by one. So Hugo Perego is one of the ones that I really want to talk about, and we will when we get into the Nile of Nine, okay, and why they mapped out Joseph Smith, okay? They mapped Joseph Smith, and it says on here, that he was actively applying his DNA science to the history of migrations described in the Book of Mormon, like I said. This guy is definitely still alive. He is not that old. And his connections and stuff are interesting. Nothing nefarious, but I'm just saying, yeah, I think there's more to the story than what they're giving us there. And then we've got Homer R. Warner, who was also a Mormon physician, who was super important in all this, as well as with the computing and the clinical data. So we've got all of these people, and by the way, that is from the DNA Learning website, just so people can check me on that. But of course, it was all under the rug. Okay, whatever. I'm just going to put this out here because I feel like as I read it, and then when we'll do the clincher at the end, I just feel like it plays into things massively. All right. And so, of course, don't forget, you can't have anybody but, mom and dad couples to be recorded in the archives. No same-sex couples, because, the prophet now would have electrocuted them. Check that one out for fun. Oh, allegedly. I'm not saying he did. I mean, he said he could cure you that way, but whatever. But anyway, back to my point. The digital data storage and the scientific tools, right, using Mormons for this whole situation is supposed to be just, we just want to baptize all the people. But you don't really need their DNA for that. So I don't know why this became so important, but whatever. Okay, so all of this gets lumped in. And then we get people like George Church that just, boop, he pops up now, he pops up then. But why? Right? Okay. A little strange for me. So the next little piece, the next little tie-in comes from this article from HealthLink Friday. Okay. It's called Genome Sequencing of an Entire Family. And this one I felt like should have made bigger waves, and maybe it did, and I just don't remember it. But honestly, I don't ever remember Utah being like, ooh, they're the people for DNA. But this says the family in Utah has made medical history by being the first in the world. Okay, we're not talking about just our little area of the woods, our backwoods little crazy Mormon people. Nope, nope. In the world, who have had their entire family genome sequenced. Okay. So these scientists examined all of their 22,000 genes in a successful effort to find the cause of their rare disorders. Now, granted, they're trying to help, not hurt. And this is the author was kingandkings.com. So just so people can check it. But I do find it strange that, okay, you're trying to help with these different things for diseases, but it just seems like there's an extra lot of, like they're on top of the Mormons, like constantly during this time. I just think I don't know, maybe it's just me and I'm reading into things because I'm locked in my house and, can't do the things, whatever. But long story short, we're seeing it time and time again during this whole period. Okay. And then we get into back to Hugo. And Hugo Perego, who was more focused on Native American ancestry, which is great. I think all of that's good. But here's the thing. He calls them the founding mothers. That was pretty interesting. And for those of you that have watched for a long time, I do say that the obfuscation of a more Gnostic type situation, which I don't care what you do. Like I don't know the answer, but I do know this. I think they're hiding it. Like why all of a sudden this huge focus, right, on founding mothers and Hugo Perego and all this stuff. So I just found this very interesting. This is what this article says, key researcher based in Salt Lake City, specialized in mitochondrial DNA and trace origins of genetics of Native Americans. Now, while that is good, I don't think it's for the reasons they say, right? And so this was called the Founding Mothers Project. And then we've got all the ones I've already laid on the table, which I know this might be a little boring, but it's going to tie. So, and then Dennis O'Rourke, right? He specialized in the ancient DNA and he was trying to prove the migration for the Book of Mormon. We've got Justin Tackney, also a researcher at the University of Utah who worked with O'Rourke, specializing in ancient DNA. We've got Scott Woodward, and he's the director of BYU Center for Molecular Genealogy, focusing on genetic analysis of populations. And then we've got Renee Begay, who was a Navajo geneticist who worked on the ethical DNA collection for Native Americans as well. So do I think this was all just innocuous? Like, I don't know. We've got Howard Hughes money, which is, FU money. Like, let's be realistic. What he left behind is bananas. Like, it's so much that they fought over it for 30 years, for those of you that don't know. And so when we see how obsessed Howard Hughes became, and if you know about something called the Golden Bough, and obviously I would definitely recommend, going and checking out my friend's Golden Bough stuff that we did, because I'm not the one, but it made a lot of sense to me. And I just sat back and went, that's weird, So yeah, I don't know. Whatever. If you look it up and you draw the lineation, it makes a whole lot more sense how they kept a king, because how would you convince a king that he is a king, right? Like, and if you do convince the king that he's a king, if you read the Golden Bough, then the king has duties, right? And then one of them is like, you can't have your feet touch the floor. Then he started wearing tissue boxes on his feet, and just, it gets weird. I'm telling you guys. And I just think, check out the Golden Bough with Dr. Luke. I think it's great. And I think it's good for people to see old books like that. I think it's an abridged version still, because it's huge. But when you start looking at it, it makes a whole lot more sense, because we've not only got the Golden Bough, right? We've got what else that comes back that's golden, and what they're chasing all the time, right? The Golden Fleece. And we're looking at these genome projects, and we're looking at these secret societies, and we're looking at, all of the stuff I presented last time. And we're looking at, the genome hubs in the 1980s, especially, with the church and Howard Hughes being wild up about stuff and not wanting to die, and the money that was left over, and then the Human Genome Project. And it just becomes kind of interesting, right? I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot there. And then when we tie it in to the very fact that we have the Alta Club. By the way, the Alta Club, for those that don't know, and if you missed that episode, I would definitely go watch the Alfalfa Club episode. But it was a historical social club in Salt Lake City known for its exclusive membership and influence on Utah's industrial and cultural history. So it's just supposed to be a fancy guy's place, right? And it's gone now. But, Mitt Romney was one of the main. There's Senator Orrin Hatch, like other mining tycoons like Thomas Kearns. And we know that overall these were like the wheelers, the dealers, the big boys, We know that these are not your average everyday people, right? And so when we get that and we get all these, billionaires becoming very philanthropic, and then they're going to, the millionaire dinner club, which we're going to get into, not today, most likely. And then it became the billionaire, dinner club. And we've got him as in Jeffrey Epstein, about, Rosicrucian societies and new Rosicrucian societies. I'm like, sure, it's new, because this comes up old, right? This comes up with Howland. This comes up with the John D mysteries. This comes up with the supposed, protocols of Zion. I know people don't like to hear about that and they say it's fake or whatever, but it comes up a lot. And so it just seems like, and we know that, the elites are very interested in keeping score, right? We know that they have the Mayflower Foundation. We know that they have multiple books, right? There's chapters and chapters and volumes of this. So if it didn't matter, would we start clear back in 1914 with eugenics societies here in Utah with Dr. Frank M. Driggs? Would we have things like Dr. Allen, who was at the state training school sterilizing people? Would we have, prominent national eugenics advocates who are talking about the important achievements in public health because Utah was sterilizing a higher proportion of the population than almost anyone else, according to the University of Utah? Yeah, I don't know. That seems to me like they're doing some weeding. That's honestly what that feels like. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they always want to say it doesn't matter, but then we constantly see them making it matter, right? We constantly see all of these people keeping very close ties on all of their genetics and their genealogy and their family lines and their everything. So I don't know. It's a little hard to believe that it doesn't matter. And then we've got, the Alta Summit, which is huge, where we've got Dr. George Church pop up again, stating that in 1984, according to this article, and I think it's cited at the end. Let's see. No, Oak Ridge National Labs is who put this out, and it's called the Alta Summit is widely considered a foundational event for the Human Genome Project, HGP. So it says scientific milestones held in December 1984 at the Alta Ski Resort near Salt Lake City. Their meeting was organized by the Department of Energy. You don't say. Howard Hughes was totally involved in all kinds of departments of energy and nuclear, all kinds of stuff like that. He was super crazy about it. And so I just found that interesting. I haven't had a chance to dial this apart and see each tiny piece. But clearly when I saw George's name, I went, oh, that's weird, because this is years and years and years ago. Right? This is 1984. And so they're talking about how to detect DNA mutations in survivors of Hiroshima and other atomic bombings right around, clearly, Howard's been dead by this time, but he was obsessed with these bombings, right? We know this. It's been talked about a lot. He wanted it all to be stopped, more I believe, because two reasons. He was talking about things coming through when you pierce the veil, and also about, getting sick. And he was super worried about that. But we again see this crop through here. Okay. And that seems a little strange. And then we've got, the Utah Population Database, so UPDB, and the researchers there combined with the genealogical records of the LDS Church. So right there, clear in 1984, we've already got this mixing. Okay. And this comes up, and I'm like, okay, so that's why I gave that background of all those doctors. Like, why the hell does it matter, Heidi? Why are you going on and on? Well, it does. Because if this is a hub and the Mormon people are elevated for some reasoning, okay, why? And why did they do all of this research on Joseph Smith and where his genealogy was when he had far less children and far less of his generations that went on and on than Brigham Young? Why didn't we do that? Strange. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I will say this, I do find it super interesting. And this article even talks about, later, right? This is the 30th anniversary of the Alta Summit. And it talks about Richard Myers was battling a nasty case of altitude sickness. And the young scholar Myers had joined 18 other researchers, and I am trying to find all of who were there, at a gathering 8,500 feet above sea level at the Alta Ski Resort. P.S. Wow, about that sickness. That's not even that bad. The weather outside was stormy, and the scientists spent much of their 5 days of the meeting snowed inside discussing the repercussions of an event that had occurred nearly 40 years earlier. Is it possible to track radiation-induced mutations in the DNA of descendants of those who were exposed to these bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? So this is what they're putting it underneath. It's been sponsored by the Department of Energy, so they have to have a reason for it, right? And we're back to Alta Club and George Church in Utah, and we've got that slew of information that I gave you guys about all of the connects from Howard Hughes to Utah Mormons once again. And so, with Dr. Church, his team invented CRISPR for human stem cell genome editing and other synthetic biology technologies and applications, including new ways to create organs. Fakely create organs, okay, for transplants. And I'm not saying that they're not saving lives. I'm just saying the ethics on it are an issue. And as a nurse, I'm telling you, that is a situation that comes up time and time again. Do I think that's terrible? No. But does it make us step back and say, okay, what really is going on here? Yeah, I think so. So, they're talking about reversing Lyme disease and malaria and whatnot. But there's also another reason. So I love how they just kind of go over this and they're like, good thing, gene therapy. And then they throw in and age reversal and gene drivers for that. What? I thought we were being philanthropists and we're trying to, help people and blah, blah, blah. Well, then what happened there? Why are we trying to make it so people are young again? Right? I don't know. But yeah, he's also over the research project's activity for intelligence, advanced intelligence, the National Institute of the Health's Brain, BRAIN initiative, their acronym, and the Center for Excellence in Genomic Studies. He's also did a book called Regenesis, and I have not got my hands on all of that yet, but I mean, just from the title alone, I definitely would be interested. And the fact that, he has been very on the line, whether or not he was on the up and up with some of this stuff, we'll say. I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm just repeating, as far as what is out there, right, in the medical realm, we'll say that way. And again, we're at, the Alta Club, and, we're at the Alta Summit, we're studying genomics, we're stuck in a blizzard, so they say, and, we just have to figure this out. So it really helped us. And I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. But also, what else were you doing? And a couple of the other people they did name there and talk about in this, article, which actually was really interesting, from Hudson Alpha. That's the article name. And it talks about this whole genome studies. It said 30 years from the Genome Project. Myers was one. It doesn't have the first name on that one. Maynard Olson is one from St. Louis. what other names are in here? But they're talking about, this whole mismatched RNA probe genomic stuff. And they're making it they make it sound good. They're packaging it nice. Like, let's just save all the people. And, the Department of Energy is only helping because blah, blah, blah. And the whole, situation with Hiroshima. But honestly, like, when you look at the whole thing and you kind of break it down, I'm like, were you really just doing the age part there? And when it's sponsored by the United States Department of Energy, and we've got private companies involved. One of them was a private company, Celera, CELERA, headed by biochemist Craig Venter, VENTER. We've got these different people all in the mix, and then we've got George Church later talking, to Jeffrey Epstein about, all the genomes and genomics. And one of the headings on this particular email was rejuvenate, right? And we know that they were talking back and forth about this retreat or whatever, but were they? I mean, what were they really doing? It seems, I don't know. To me, it seems like, even if it isn't nefarious, it seems a little strange what was really going on there. And they're like, oh, shucks, we just got snowed in. Okay, whatever. And then, we get into the whole situation in Utah and about eugenics. And it was huge. Here in Utah, it was, really pushed. I mean, it was like 1/3 of the total population was under 10 years of age in the 1940s, and they were approaching, it says, nearly 1/6 of the USTS population, and they were trying to weed out the feeble-mindedness, okay? And some of the doctors, like Dr. George Edward Hyde, yes, Orson Hyde's son, he didn't seem so bad per se. I mean, he treated people nice, and he did try to get, like the epileptics not to be in the same category, I guess, as the mentally ill, which they shouldn't have been. But like he did do some good things. I'm not saying this is all bad, but there was a lot of things happening at this point with laws being taken away, like kids getting taken away from their parents for very minor things. And if there was any kind of family issue whatsoever, like I personally, my great grandma's sister had 2 kids. Well, she had 3, and one got hit by a car, and he was kind of the normal one. And then she had a severely handicapped daughter. And then she had another son that was he was just a little bit slow. I bet he was just on the spectrum. Like, he was fine. But after the kid got hit by the car, and it was no fault. It was no fault of it. It was an accident. Like, I mean, what do you do? They came in and removed her other 2 children and sterilized them both. And when he came back, he was so bad that, he was more than on the spectrum when he came back. He came back damaged. And it was really sad, because my grandma told me the story all about it. And she was like, yeah, he was good. He was fine. And after that, he was so scared of all humans. It was so sad. And so what exactly they were doing there, I mean, well, we can tell you this little snippet from the Shipler Collection, Utah State Historical Society. An editorial in the Salt Lake Telegram supported the vision of Utah State Mental Hygiene Society. The fact that we had something called the Utah State Mental Hygiene Society makes me want to throw up. So anyway, it does say, in the starting new year, to make this city a national example of moral purity and social orderliness. So, like, they're just praising the facts that up at the Utah State Hospital and different, hospitals here and there, that they're just, eugenically snipping people. We'll just say it that way. But don't worry, it's all supported by the Lions Club, the American Legion, and the Relief Society, which, for those that don't know, that's the women's end of the church. So also there were others, involved with backing this, but I just found that a little funny. So yeah, whatever. But I'm not saying everything they did was bad. I'm just saying that there's a chart, and I wished I could, I'm going to try and find a way to show it, about the eugenics sterilizations in Utah. And there's like this chart on the left, and it's all of like the prisons and the hospitals, like the Utah State Hospital and the prison, actual prison. And then, so they're all like little. And then we get to this hospital where they're supposed to help people, right? And the one funded that I just spoke about. And it's called, let's see, the Utah State Training School of Development Center. And their numbers are off the chart, like even way worse than the prison. So I just feel like that's, I don't know. So for those that want the little article name on this one, it is The Victims of Eugenics Sterilization in Utah by James Tabery, Tabery, and Nicole Novak. Lida, Sarah Fraz, and Aubrey Mansfield. So this is the full article if anybody wants to go read that. But these sterilizations were completely state sponsored from 1925 to 1974. And they did not get an apology until I think a few years ago. So yeah, this primary research, all in the name of research, was based on pseudoscience of hereditary inadequacy. So yeah, if you're, poor, it's probably from your heredity, mental illness. Well, that one's probably true, but the breeding out basically of all of this. Okay. And the sterilizing of these people was passed with the Utah legislation. Okay. And, yeah, sometimes this is what it says. This included people institutionalized for being habitually sexually criminal. Oh, not like the guys with 2,000 wives. No, not really. But yeah, whatever. Sexually criminal and idiotic, imbeciles, feeble-minded, or epileptic. And so heaven forbid you have epilepsy back then, because you might just have to be sterilized because, you have to be cleansed. So all of this stuff is going on, and all this research was going on, state funded, okay, at the Utah State Hospital, but they were far smaller than this other one, and the Utah State Training School in American Fork. So that was opened in the 1930s, and it is now called the Utah State Development Center. And it became the hub of the majority of the state's sterilizations, like I mentioned. And there is that graph, and I'll try and put that up. The ones that I feel like are like the very most important, I'll get up there, or maybe I'll be able to find a way to edit this offline, because every time I get online, it's a little sitch. So by 1916, Dr. George A. Hyde, he was the superintendent from 1916 until 1922. He did try, like I said, I feel like he was a kinder person, maybe. He would try to get, these different hospital programs funded, especially for the epileptics, like saying, hey, they're smart. They're not really broken, which is sad. He did try a few things, but I just find it interesting when we get to the different articles on it, which especially the articles stating things like this one in this article by Henderson, suggesting establish a eugenics program as an effort to produce better men through a more prolific birth rate on the part of the innately superior people. And a less prolific birth rate on the part of the low capacities. We can't have those low capacities running around. Yeah. And then the second article, the states from 1943 in this box, called, and I quote, "The Human Problem." Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So Henderson addresses the topic of increasing human population of who? The great ones, right? Meanwhile, they're telling it's still continuing to this day. I mean, you can see it all over the place. You can see it all over the place where they're like, hey, you imbecile poor people, don't have any more kids. But hey, you rich people like Elon, how many kids does he have? Yeah. Okay. Case closed. So I'm just saying, like, obviously those rules are not for just everybody, right? So I found this article super great. This is by Christine Fraser, the Utah State Training School, its founding and development. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you want to, you can. But it says this, it says, our historical response tells the story of a people who were ostracized. They were the village idiots. They were the simple Simons, unworthy of life. And people lacking in intelligence and skills were looked at as less than in this world. They needed to be the best and the brightest. The result of this attitude has left a less than systematic brutality and alienation. In Nazi Germany, for example, they allowed sterilization to control the proliferation of the unfit in the ideology that saw extermination of the mentally inferior. But guess who they learned it from? Oh, yeah, that's right. hmm Part of it was the Utah Training School. So during this time, they did have a couple good laws that came out of some of this stuff. And that was, especially in Utah, they started trying to preserve specific genetic lineages, but also stop marrying each other if you're, in the same families. So they stopped allowing consanguinity and had restrictions on that. That means same blood, right? And stop marrying your first cousin, please. So that was good, I feel. Also, it said they only could have an exception if the parties were over 65. So if you're first cousins and you're not having a baby, do what you want. So I don't know. I feel like that at least was a good thing, but definitely they were trying to curate a population. And I think they pretty much succeeded at that, to be quite frank. And none of this is new. Like if you look at the Oneida Company and you look at what they were doing, they would match people together that didn't even want to be together or sleep together to make, better babies. And so I mean, you can kind of see that here as well. And you see it with the Mormon hierarchy. Like, okay, this is, the better people. They always are married to like the same better people. It's, same like the royals. It's all the same. So according to the U of U at this, time frame, this was an article later, they started talking about why the Mormons were looked at in a good way, right? And it said fitter families, the eugenicists admired the large, healthy, and industrious families produced by early Mormon leaders. So workers, right? Worker beehive. It's the beehive state, but whatever. And then also it talks about, in Hereditary Trove in 1913, some eugenicists called Brigham Young's extensive family lineage an untapped trove of useful hereditary information because his descendants appeared to have very few defectives. Have you seen Brigham Young and his children? I mean, whatever. That's fine. Also, later scholars like Christine Rosen argued that Mormon doctrine was not inherently adverse to eugenics and that it was fine to make healthy bodies for souls. So, I mean, that's a little bit interesting, definitely sounds like some stuff that we're seeing with the whole Epstein thing as well. And then we start looking into, the forcibly sterilized people, and this is from the Salt Lake Tribune, over 830 people were forcibly sterilized. That's not even talking probably about the many, many people that were coerced, right? And that they never got any kind of help from that. Like they never got an apology. They never got, I think it was way, 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 way later. So I just feel like all of this is a bigger key to the puzzle than what they want it to remain to be, right? And when we look at the fact that we know how many people were actually in Joseph Smith's line and Emma's line, don't forget they were cousins and they had almost the same people on the Mayflower. Why is it that was so important? Because that Howland line is huge. And we're going to go more into like why and where that went. But like, obviously people are like, oh, well, why do you care about that? And I'm a Howland, yes, me too. But here's the thing. When you have every president almost, this is why I'm always like, oh, I'm related to this person, this person. Yes, because I come from this line. And so when you have these lines and they are of the utmost importance, right? Utmost importance to like completely make huge, books about it and volumes about it and do societies and all these things, right? It has to make you question like, well, then why is it so important? And who cares, right? Oh, who cares about blood? What will you do for somebody that you're related to versus what will you do to somebody that you're not? Blood is thicker than water, and that is the truth. And the truth remains that if you're in a close-knit situation where, especially if it's hidden, are you going to do more for somebody that, is in your line that you are supposed to help because you were told that from a young age? I mean, I dare say yes, right? So it's a little interesting. Then I also do have a photo that I'll put in here of the report of the Utah State Board of Insanity from 1933. And although Utah institution was charted to admit the trainable as well as those who had defects and prevented them from properly taking care of themselves. So we're talking about poor people, maybe less motivated people, maybe depressed people. Like, I'm not saying that's not a drain on society, but certainly, do we kill people for that? Like, no, I think there's a way better way. Like, I just don't understand, like, why that in particular would be the answer, right? Like, this is the answer. I just can't imagine that, that's all there is back then. It seems so against everything the church teaches too, because do you want to know why everybody was so poor and all of this stuff? It's because they would tell them, and still do, to have tons of kids, which plays into this, right? Even though they couldn't afford them. And I just think that right there is a little bit of, a T cross, like crossing your T's, dotting your I's. When we look at this whole genetic situation, when you want to say, okay, the poor people are the problem, but you're making them poor because you're telling them to keep having children, like literally. I mean, there were people that I used to go to church with that had upwards of 12 kids, and they did not have any money. Half their kids, weren't hardly, some didn't have shoes, like all kinds of stuff. And yes, the church would bump in and help them here and there, but like they would not tell her to stop. They kept saying like, oh, if you think you can, keep going. Right. And I just feel like there's got to be more to it than that. Okay. It just doesn't seem quite right. So, yeah. So, when we get into Jeffrey Epstein's part of this, I found this really cool article, and it's called Epstein in Israel. Jeffrey Epstein recruited NSA codebreakers for Genome Manhattan Project. So, okay, we are back to another rich guy who thinks he's God, going forward and, doing things to stay alive. Jeffrey Epstein wanted his brain and his genitals taken care of some way. Like, I don't know if it was cryogenics or what, but those were the things he wanted saved for later. We got Howard Hughes trying to cryogenically freeze himself, even though they said he never said that. I'm sorry. I'm going to believe the guy that worked with him every day over a bunch of people that just gossip. But in this particular, and the article's February 2026. So I found this very interesting that, they bring up the fact that he was completely involved in the high stakes exchange of advanced technology involving the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and oh my gosh, I don't know if I can say that, Skolkovo Innovation Center, a Russian government-backed technology that was aimed to jumpstart a venture and innovation ecosystems in Moscow. So we've got, Jeffrey hiring basically NSA people to code break the genomes, right? And we've got Russian backing somehow fitting into this. We've got, the interview with Steve Bannon months before his death talking about the Zorro Ranch, which we know there's been some strange stuff coming out from that. And we definitely do need to talk about that further. And we've got all of these documents that are coming out that keep talking about genomes and genomic sequencing and all these scientists. And we've got this rich guy that doesn't seem to fit. Like, honestly, it's that way every single time. And so what are they telling them, or what are they sharing with them, with the elites, right? To make this a bigger issue. Like, what is that? I mean, it just seems strange. To me, I feel like this just completely fits a piece into the puzzle, in my opinion. And when we look at all of this, we come across one last piece. Let me look at this really quick, because these are only pulling up one at a time, and they're definitely not in order, so that blows. But let's see. I wish this was cleaner, but these slides are kind of like spazzing out, and it makes me kind of wonder if he's even able to monitor this way. Part of the way he's doing this is by an MDM program. So he doesn't necessarily put a virus. What he does is he manages me like I'm part of a business or a family and turns me into a kid. So it's been a nightmare. So part of this whole Jeffrey piece is something called the Venus Project, okay? And this, I do believe, is extremely, extremely important. So, this focus was aimed to study Epstein's DNA for longevity involving skin biopsies. He also had like different things taken from that, and it was done through Dr. Joseph Thakuria, Thakuria, provided an invoice for approximately $160,000 for this work. Okay. And there were connections on this work back to George Church. So the initiative was part of a broader internet in human genomics and manipulation, suggesting he wanted to hack his way out of the aging process. So it's a little strange, right? Like, not the same Venus Project, by the way, as Fresco. That's a different situation. But I do find it very interesting that we've got all of this going on, and these scientists, always trying, gosh, my nose is so itchy. I'm so sorry, you guys. Trying to continue to make better humans and longer living. And I mean, I guess there's nothing wrong with that, but I just feel like they would go about it, and what we've seen, very unethically, right? We've seen this time and time again. So, and just for the people that want to double check that article, the Venus Project, Jeffrey Epstein paid for genetic testing to extend his life, new emails show. And that story is by Glory Moralidad. And so that is the original on that one. So, and you know what? My lighting is being weird and everything. So I'm pretty sure he's playing shenanigans. But anyway, when we look at this stuff and we look at how intricate, right, the Mormons have been with all of the genetic studies, with all of the stuff from Utah, with everything that we're seeing back and forth, right? It makes one wonder and step back and go, okay, what did they know? I mean, honestly, like, obviously they got enough information that certain key players became huge, right? And so, and it just seems a little weird. That's all. Like, I'm not accusing anybody of anything bad per se, but it does seem odd. So, and my allergies are just so bad. Sorry about that, guys. So on all of this and where we're going with it, right? I think it's going to get really important on the next one, where we start talking about, where Epstein put his money, where and who he was palling up with for this kind of stuff. Because I know we're getting into like too long here. Why Howard Hughes became so obsessed with, like, he went from planes to all of a sudden Howard Hughes Medical Institution and all this stuff, about living forever and whatever. I think that's also really like intricate when we look at everything and why all of a sudden he changed, right? That seems very weird. I don't know. And we also need to look at the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was 100% in pockets and funding pockets of some very important, scientists, geneticists, and whatever. So in that, I have to question, what other Mormons were there? Because we already know, Mr. Blood Boy, I'm not going to say his name again because that was right around the same time as everything else. You guys can catch that one. But, he's a Mormon. And he's talking about blood. Howard Hughes is talking about Mormon blood. Like, the prophet stuff came up. Like, it just seems like too many things. Okay. And I just feel like something's going on here. They have figured something out, and I don't know what that is. But I definitely think that it's worth exploring further. And I definitely think that, in Citizen Hughes, this is 100% a quote from a book. Citizen Hughes is the book. The vampirism claims are my own. His record of blood transfusions is public record and well documented in Citizen Hughes, which also provides a unique insight on Hughes's life. Of course, one has to read in between the lines to see all the possibilities. And in that, the vampire claims are that his blood transfusions were Mormon blood. And this states Dr. Harold Fikes, Feikes, okay, on page 488 of Citizen Hughes, a Las Vegas heart specialist. I know somebody else that was a heart specialist. He died. He was the prophet of the church, just barely. I wonder if they knew each other. Anyway, we're not going to get off track, but it talks about the blood transfusion in November of 1968, and it talks about how he asked for pure Mormon blood, page 295. So this is on Citizen Hughes, and I just feel like we need to look at all of this and all of the stuff, with Jeffrey Epstein, all of the stuff that we keep seeing time and time again pop up, and it just seems like there is more to this story than meets the eye, especially when we know he's looking for, different codes to crack, and the NSA, and Howard Hughes was, cracking the blueprint of DNA and the genesis of life and this and that. I mean, it's just kind of strange, I just think that if we really dig enough, right, maybe we're going to find some things that are more than a little interesting. So far, I know I've been completely enthralled with all this. Like I said, it's not as many photos anyway, but I'll try and make them smaller folders so we won't have this mixing up, because I'm sure he's just having a heyday with it. But I do know that we have a lot more to get into, especially when it comes to Mormons and the Human Genome Project. We got to talk about Ann Warchicki and 23andMe. We need to talk about her little connections with the Human Genome Project. And we need to talk about how that all plugs into these other billionaires, or, scientists, it seems, one of the two, right? We also need to have a little chat, and I'll make it a little more clear because this has been really all over the place as far as my slides, of course, which sucks. But different businesses like Regeneron. We need to talk about, Ann Warchicki's husband, and we need to talk about her sister and her nephew that had untimely deaths. And so anytime when we see a little picture like that, I just find it really interesting. And I mean, you can't just say it's nothing. We can't just throw it all out and say, oh, well, that's, it's fine. Yeah, it might be fine, but also there's a lot going on there. And so for me, I just think that this piece is huge. And so next time, we're going to talk about the selection of how they started the eugenics here in Utah, and why it was backed and continued through polygamy, which is kind of strange. But, he thought he knew a whole lot, Mr. Kingston there. And why? Because he had cattle, and he based all his studies on that. We're going to talk about some emails about consanguination, right? That whole same blood thing, which is a lot of the case here in Utah, because Mormon families were close. Even if you didn't know you were related, you could have married on accident, or, a lot of times, as in the Kingston's case, on purpose. You would marry somebody very close to you as far as like your bloodline, to keep your bloodline pure. And a strange email talking about, could they use CRISPR to fix people that weren't attracted to each other because, they were related? That's a little weird. I think that there's a whole bunch here, and I know that everybody's talking about Epstein right now, but I really am off the beaten path, and I'm definitely over on my own island trying to figure out what exactly is going on, especially not for the whole picture, but just for my genetic component, for like the family history component, for the age stuff. I'm more interested there. So that's where I'm going to live on this stuff. But I don't think it's just chuck it out and say, oh, well, everybody knows now, so who cares? No, this goes to some very interesting places and some very interesting businesses. And I really wish my slides would have A, showed, and B, been better and clear wise. And I don't know why now my lighting's completely crazy, but that's great. Also, things like ambrosia. We definitely are going to want to talk about Peter Thiel. We're definitely going to want to have quite a few chats about all this stuff. And I'm not saying anybody is doing anything nefarious, but they definitely have been involved and interested in these things. So, is there anything that I see that is, a smoking gun of some crime? No, and I'm not really interested in that. But I am interested in the fact that, the transhumanism, the embryos, all these things that have been talked about, and designer babies, and, the biological change of the bodies, such as, Peter Thiel's quote on the approach to genetics is often described as digital eugenics or transhumanism. Of course, he believes that he'd rather than uploading minds to computers, we should transform our biological bodies into something immortal. Well, if you've ever been around Mormons, you'll know that they're very obsessed with time and all eternity. And I don't think that's a coincidence. With all of this, I hope I've presented it at least somewhat palatable. I'm going to try and edit the best I can. But between the allergies and my slides being crazy, and apparently he's just going to screw with my stuff no matter what, which, I'll figure it out. I have backup plan A, B, C, D, L, M, N, O, P, but we shall continue. And if you guys find this interesting, or if you can just help me by leaving comments, and especially if you can leave me a review on Apple, that is so helpful in the algorithm because it's in the dirt. It's completely in the dirt. And, as they hoped it would be, it is. Not much I can do about that other than ask you guys who have been so gracious and supported me. If you like what I do, I have 0 sponsors. This is the only way that I can keep my podcast afloat and possibly pay for studios and whatever. If I ever hope to be doing interviews again, I'm not probably going to do that in my home. So I'm going to probably have to outsource that and, just different things. It's ridiculous the amount of effort that somebody is going to shut down things that are already out there. There is not one thing here that I presented tonight that hasn't already been presented in articles or, other people talking about it. So why the shutdown? I don't know. I do know. I do pretty much know. And I feel like it's stupid, and as far as the community goes, shout out Grim, shout out Chef. I saw your guys' comments and I just am so appreciative, and Nick, hey, he had already asked me to come on a show when things get back to normal from Occult Rejects. Sunday Night Secret Society, that's another one. And I just feel like, there isn't everybody in the community isn't on the same page with me, obviously. And some people have been really kind and sent me one or two things and then kind of disappeared. Obviously, I've had to change everything around and my number's just being monitored. So I don't even try to text people or do anything from it except the bare minimum until I can completely change it and recover all of my accounts. So yeah, if you did try, I appreciate it too, guys. But just maybe leave comments on the YouTube and whatnot, because for now, otherwise that just doesn't work out. And I did get a wonderful package. I don't know if I should shout her name but she's been a longtime fan and you know who you are. And I appreciate you so much. What you did was so kind. That was like, I don't know. That was just, I almost cried, and it was just so kind of you to send me a few things and some kind words, and you know who you are. So I don't know if I should shout you or not. So I'm so grateful. Watch for me. If I'm not here, I'll be somewhere. I'm not going to quit. I'm not. I don't care. I don't care what they try to do. And, there's been multiple people that have said things over the years. And all I've ever done is try to support people. I've never turned people down for shows. That's probably why I got hacked, because, I just was an open door. and I can't open that door right now. So unfortunately, that's where I'm at, but still unfiltered, I rise and I will continue. And I'm just not built for giving up. That's just not who I am. It's not going to happen. So as for me, I appreciate you all so much. You have no idea how wonderful the comments were. Like, you guys have been absolutely amazing. And my family has been just awesome. And they've had to put up with so much. I'm so grateful for my kids and for my husband and my mom and everybody that's just backed me along the whole way. And I don't know if you guys can read that sign right there, but I can't turn it on because it's so bright, but it says "Don't quit." And right before all this happened, my mom had bought that for me for Christmas. And I just look at that and say, yep, she's right. So here I am. And I'll be staying. Sorry to say. So much love, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm going to keep on plowing through, and I hope you guys are also, and have a great one.